Odin the All-father communicates with his patrons and other, fellow Aesir via raven. This is evidenced by the behaviors of Hugin and Munin, who go out into the world and collect information at the dawn and bring it back to share the bounty of secrets with the All-father in the evening. However, that's not evidenced anywhere in the sagas or the old myths. As a matter of fact, Odin rarely ever uses ravens of any kind for messengers or guides, but for some reason we believe that that is the standard, that is the common belief amongst Asatru and any who find themselves more Nordically inclined. But why? Why do we believe that's true, and how did Odin actually prefer to communicate? Well, I'll tell you what. If you want to grab a drink and grab a seat, I will not only tell you how Odin, and you will know indefinitely, you will know undisputably how Odin communicated by the end of this video. I will make sure that you have his personal mobile cell phone number. So grab your drink, grab your seat. Old Castle's got a story for you. Welcome back to my tavern. I am Castle, and here we talk about myth and lore and tales of yore, most specifically and usually sets of stories handed down throughout my family. Old, silly stories. But today we're talking about Odin, and the way that he communicates with his patrons as well as with other gods. This is a part of a series that I will link at the end in the card, but you don't have to watch them in order as they are not in any way episodic. You can just watch them in whatever order you like. But today we're talking about Odin specifically, and where did this raven myth come from? That's what we're going to talk about first. Where did the myth of the raven come from? Then we will talk about his three favourite ways of communicating, from least favourite to most favourite, and that ought to be a grand old time. And I'll give you a little ritual at the end for how you can actually, based on what our ancestors believe, communicate with the All-father. So stay tuned. Where does this idea that ravens are not only the guides of the All-father, but they are also the messengers, where does that come from? Well, it's a simple conflation of two different instances. The first being the gathering of information by Hugin and Munin that Snorri Sturluson very much focused on in his compilations. So much so that there are a dozen or more mysteries that surround the two birds and what they actually mean and what they actually are, and that is a fascinating topic in and of itself. But more so, where this comes from is Vikings of old and long-distance sailors of old from Scandinavia would take domesticated ravens with them when they would go out on long trips, especially if they weren't sure where they were headed. And the reason they did this is because raven breast feathers are hydrophobic. I know, how could anybody be phobic anything in the 21st century, but how very un-21st century raven breast feathers. But what that meant was that they could not land on the water, so if they were released out at sea, they had no choice but to either land back on the boat or head towards dry land, and more often than not, they would head towards dry land, so they would go up and circle and circle and circle higher and higher until they spotted land, and then they would head for it. The Vikings would then follow them, or sailors, and that would then take them to the fine and grand safety of a new or old land. This, combined with the many mentions of Hugin and Munin, is very likely, and most probably, where the myth of the guide / messenger of Odin being the raven actually came from. Now, there are some instances in our family's lore where they refer to the black wings or the ravens of Odin as the soul collectors, the Valkyrie, which I have spoken about in some length in some older videos. which I will link in the cards up above. Other than that, there were no instances in the old sagas or myths of Odin using ravens for anything other than just gathering information and secrets, sort of like spies. So that leads us to what were Odin's actual favourite ways of communicating. And we're starting out with a bit of a doozy. This one is almost exclusively found in our family's lore, and that is communicating via bear. I know, almost completely unheard of. Now, in our family's version of the myth, Odin surrenders his eye for knowledge over the 9 realms, for knowledge of the runes, to a bear called Futhark, and that bear was the keeper of the runes, or you might say the bearer of the runes. Yes, thank you. Wait until the end of the set for the applause. Yes, thank you. After this had taken place, that bear had 2 cubs, and those cubs were, for lack of a better word, giant fucking bears. And those bears would on occasion send messages for Odin, and those messages usually looked a little something like, "Hi, how are you doing? How's your mother? I've sent this giant bear to kill you." And as you can imagine, those messages were not pleasantly or eagerly received. But there is a belief, or was a belief amongst Old Norsemen, is that men who could in fact tame brown and black bears were descendants of Odin, as they had the ability to communicate or tame these mighty beasts. And the same is true for the next set, the Great Grey Wolf. Contrary to popular belief on media, Odin's distaste for Vargar or wolves didn't really mature until his old age nearing Ragnarok, and it was really just 1 or 2 wolves that he didn't like, as is evidenced by Geri and Freki, who were his constant and common companions, who he did on occasion in some myths and sagas send out with messages, or even send out to retrieve certain creatures, animals, and sometimes, as Odin did like to do, go out and kill things. And it was also said, amongst those who could tame grey wolves, that they were touched or descended from the great chieftain or god Odin. And that was true of ravens, bears, and wolves. These were groups of animals that were not commonly tamed, and it was one of the reasons why people feared the Vikings and Scandinavians of the time, because they were more than a little bit crazy, and they did in fact keep bears and grey wolves and ravens as pets. Let's get down to brass tacks. What was Odin's favourite way to communicate? Well, you might be surprised to find that it was in person. He liked to show up himself to deliver messages, or to tell people things, which is delivering a message, so I repeated myself. But he did this in 2 ways. Sometimes he would show up in grandeur. He'd show up in grand show of his might, like he did in his own hall, and on several other occasions during battles. But most often throughout the sagas, we see he appears in disguise, sometimes in women's garb, and sometimes as an old man. Usually as an old man. Like we see in the case of Hrungnir the Brawler, where Odin appears to him as an old strange traveller, and then tricks him into a race into Asgard, where he then invites him into his hall, and subsequently gets him drunk and tricks him into fighting his son to the death. Oh, jolly old Odin. Now, the other famous instance of this, and probably my favourite instance of Odin sowing chaos and discord amongst people, is in the saga of the Volsung, which I have a whole video I will link here up above. And if you guys have not already, I would appreciate you dropping a like down below. It lets the videos get out and about into the world, lets me know that you're enjoying them. And if you can put down in the cute section below your questions, comments, concerns, or compliments, and if you have a request for a video, please do that down below. So, moving on, I will have the video for the Saga of the Volsungs linked up here in the cards, but to summarise, Odin appears as an old man with a mighty magical sword, and he drives it into the trunk of the tree in the centre of the Hall of the Volsungs, and this leads to a 10-year, spoiler alert, a 10-year long conflict that is bloody as all bloody hell can be, which, again, spoiler alert, leads to all of them taking a very fiery dirt nap at the end of a deep, incestuous, frightening conflict between 2 different groups. And this was the standard for how Odin interacted with mortals throughout all of the sagas and many of the old myths. Contrary to what popular media depicts Odin as, he was not a bountiful and benevolent noble leader. He was more akin to how we view Loki. He is more of a trickster and a deceiver. This is why he has the name the Great Deceiver, the Great Oath Breaker, the God of the Gallows. He was really out for his own self-interest throughout most of the myths, and we probably should have a full video on Odin's true nature and true name. If you are interested, you can drop that down below. The communication from Odin was not something that old pagans would have looked forward to. As a matter of fact, if Odin was watching the battlefield, if there were black feathers or black wings in the air, it meant that battle should not take place because Odin was there to harvest souls, and it meant a great many soldiers would die. And again, I've spoken about that in my Valkyrie videos. Now, with that being said, there is a way that our ancestors used to communicate with the power of the All-father, and we have the All-father attunement, which I promised you guys at the start of the video. So I'm going to show you how to begin that attunement right here, right now. So let's cut over there and we'll be right back. You'll want to start with a simple, clean and flat surface. Take a important piece of jewelry, something that's close to your heart, and set it in the center. Then take a simple oil, something that is organic. I usually use beard or hair oil, and you will trace the Othila rune around it, and it is really just that simple. So that is the basic start of it. Now I only showed you that bit because that's really all you need to sort of align yourself with that cutthroat attitude. The animalistic nature of getting what you need, getting what you want at any cost. That's what that attunement is intended to do. Now, there is a full version of it that I will post here on the short shelf, as well as over on the Black Dragon Davern TikTok, and I'll also post it over on my personal Instagram. All of those things are linked down below, as well as over on the channel page up in the little links in the corner. Now, I did promise you guys Odin's personal cell phone number, and luckily enough, it is printed on the inside of every single piece of my merchandise, which the link... Nobody's buying it? Damn it. Alright, well, fine. The attunement will be enough then, but I do have merchandise if you guys would like to pick it up. And, you know, I might be doing a line of 100% historically accurate shirts depicting how the gods actually looked, if you know what I mean. I'm glad that you wandered into my tavern, my friends, and I'll see you the next time that you wander in. Stay bloodthirsty, and remember, all hail the Black Dragon.